if I want to create safety for another person, then the first question I have to ask, irregardless of any other question, is how can I enhance your sense of status, your sense of worth, your sense of value, your sense of being respected? In interpersonal relationships, the neuroscience is clear. We have to create status. We have to create respect for each other. And if we don't, then the other person's just not going to feel safe around this. Now, you try this out. You don't even have to be a CEO. Just try this out with your kid. Try this out with your mom. Try this out with your partner. See what disrespect does. See what attacking that person does. You know it as well as I do. They're not going to feel safe around you. But the moment, from a healthy, authentic place, you create respect, you offer a sense of status, as long as you're sincere, right? It can't be fake. It can't be, you flattering them. It's got to come from the heart. Tell you what, you will create safety for that person. Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning into this video. We're talking about a neuroscience-based approach to change management. And what I really want to focus on here today is the concept that belonging brings better. Now, the reality is, we all know this, that change is hard. And yet, even though change is hard, listen, friends, it's not going to stop. You know that as well as I do. Change is not going to decelerate the pace of change. It's only going to accelerate. And so if you're an organizational leader, maybe you're running that nonprofit, maybe you're building your business, maybe you've got a team, maybe you're CEO of a massive corporation, the reality is you can't ever promise your team that all the change will stop officially from this moment henceforth. Of course not. That's not the way the world works. But what you can do is create an environment, a neuroscience-based environment that will allow your team to adapt and thrive in the middle of the change, rather than experience the horrible impact of change. You see, it's interesting because recently we've been doing a lot of work with organizations around change. And these are both for-profit and nonprofit. Now, the reason I mention that is because what a lot of leaders are telling us is we understand, we appreciate the fact that we can't stop the pace of change. It is what it is. And yeah, we even brought in some change management consultants to give us this wonderful expert path for how we're going to go through the steps of the change. But the biggest challenge with our change is not, the steps of the change, the strategy around the change. The biggest problem with our change is the psychology of our people. They're not embracing the change. Their mental health is getting messed up. They're highly anxious. They're very stressed out. People don't feel safe. They don't feel secure. So could you come in and help us create an environment where people are embracing the change? So we've been doing that in organizations, and it's a lot of fun. Why? Because if we understand how the brain works, you see, the brain is a beautiful thing. It's interesting, my wife, she happens to be an Asian woman, and she was raised in Asia. And I happen to be, as you might tell, a Caucasian man raised in Canada. Now, the reason I mention that is you have two human beings who are raised in really very different cultures, very different backgrounds. I mean, she was actually raised in pretty nearly abject poverty, and a lot of her life, she didn't have running water. A lot of her life, she didn't have electricity. Of course, I was also raised in poverty, but Canadian poverty. And so, Canadian poverty is quite a bit different than poverty where she was raised. And so, I came from a broken family, with a lot of abuse and a lot of early childhood trauma. She came from a family that is very strong and healthy. So maybe in her country, they weren't very wealthy, but her family was together. Now, why am I saying all this? Because even though there's these massive sort of background and familial differences between two people, listen to me, our brain still operates basically the same. So the brain of an African person raised in Africa operates essentially the same as the brain of an Asian person raised in Asia, as opposed to the brain of a Latin American person raised in Latin America. Why am I saying this? Because if I can now, and we have to note that there are cultural differences, no doubt about it. And there's absolutely differences in how we process information and how we see things and how we understand things. And obviously language makes a huge difference, but fundamentally, the structure of our brain is essentially the same. And this has been a game changer for me because when I understood the structure of the brain, what the brain is looking for in human relationships and in human connections, all of the sudden, now you have a model that both respects culture, but also transcends it, so that I'm not necessarily bound and limited by all of the elements of culture. But now what I actually have is a toolkit that allows me to go on a journey with people at the level of neuroscience. And so the fundamental approach of neuroscience really kind of drives one thought when it comes to the workplace, and that is that belonging brings better. Now, when I say better, what am I talking about? I mean, obviously, we all, as organizational leaders, want better results. We want better profit. We want better sustainability. We want better or happier people. We want better or happier work environments. We want better conversations. We want better interactions. We want better or happier customers. And the way that we create that isn't by coming in with some really slick branding or marketing strategy. All of that is great. But you know what, friends? This is 2024. People see through all of that stuff at an unbelievably quick rate. This is not the 1980s when you could just gloss something up with a fresh rebrand and just hope that people didn't see the garbage under the surface. If you really want better, you have to go beyond your brand and you have to create belonging. People need to feel like they belong. People need to feel like they're valued. People need to feel like they're respected. People need to feel like they are cared for. Now, this isn't just in their head. You know, you might say, well, it's not my job. I'm the boss. You know, they can get their emotional needs met somewhere else. Of course, like some of their fundamental emotional needs, maybe for romance or for human connection, for family, they're going to meet outside the workplace, outside the business. Absolutely. But it's irrational to assume that people will spend about 50% of their waking hours on the job, in the business, in the thing that's making them a living, and not assume that 50% of their waking hours will have some impact on their mental health and their ability to operate. It just doesn't make sense. When people say, well, I separate my personal from my professional, it's like, yes, and so do I. But if the professional is like me 50% of the time when I'm awake, well, then of course it's going to have an impact on how I operate. Now, when we as leaders create an environment where people feel like they belong, do you know what it actually does is it not only impacts their mental health, and the research on this is just so profound. I'm not going to go into it. Check out our last video if you want some information on that. But I mean, it's just overwhelming that people need to feel belonging in order for anxiety and stress and depression and even substance abuse to go down. You know, the challenge with mental health today is not, I need the right pill. I mean, you know, sometimes that's the case, but the real challenge is people just feel so disconnected. And so the connection and belonging creates mental health. But here's the magic. It also creates physical health. I mean, this is amazing. Did you know that when you feel like you belong, when you feel like you have healthy social connections, the strength of your immune system goes way up. Your propensity for high blood pressure goes way down. I'll tell you what, the stressors in your life that are driving some of the negative physical health outcomes begin to go down. Why? Because your body's not in this stress state all the time because you don't feel like you belong. And so, you know, when you think about it, like how stressful is exclusion? Well, according to researchers, when people feel like they're being excluded, it activates the same pain centers in your brain as if you're like hitting hitting a nail with a hammer and you miss the nail and you end up hitting your thumb or your finger. The same pain centers that, I just hit my thumb with a hammer, are activated when people feel rejection, when they feel exclusion. And as a matter of fact, you probably have all heard about this idea of an amygdala hijack. That's actually what happens. Now, an amygdala hijack, if you haven't heard about that, it's not like anything really fancy. What it just means is that there's a part of our brain that is in charge of activating a threat response. And so imagine you're walking through the woods and it's just a nice day and you're singing and skipping as you go with your little lunch bucket. You're going to have a nice picnic somewhere, and out of nowhere, there comes a social media ad, wanting you to buy something. No, just joking. Out of nowhere, a bear jumps out of the woods, or maybe even just something that startles you, just this like raccoon or whatever. Well, there's a part of your brain called the amygdala that's in charge of your fear response. And this is a good thing. In other words, like if it's a bear or something that might really startle you or create danger for you, the amygdala gets activated. That's called the amygdala. It's just like about the size of an almond. It's kind of in the back of your brain. And it releases adrenaline, which then maybe allows you to run faster or maybe get a little bit stronger if you have to physically defend yourself. But one of the challenges with the amygdala is it can cause you to fight. It can cause you to flight, to run faster, but it can also cause you to freeze, right? And so that's the amygdala, which releases the fight, flight, or freeze response in our brain. All of that is good. But in social interactions, what can happen is I walk into a room and maybe the person that I'm hoping sees me or hoping acknowledges me or hoping just kind of notices that I came into the room, maybe they pay nothing in terms of attention to me. And all of a sudden I feel threatened because maybe I didn't get the raise that I was looking for. Or maybe I didn't get the promotion I was looking for. Maybe I just didn't get the acknowledgement that I felt like I deserved. And now what happens is rather than me coming into the room in a place where I'm feeling safe and where I'm operating in a place of peace and calm, now the threat response is activated. And when the threat response is activated, let me tell you, that's a horrible place to be. You ever seen somebody in the workplace? I know we've all met people like this. You don't have to name any names in the comment window below, but this is people who all they focus on is the drama or the problems on the job. Like it seems like, for them, the glass is never half full. It's always nearly empty. And for them, they've never had a work day where they didn't start a fight or send a nasty email or shoot out a text that is, hurtful or spiteful or angry or resentful. They always feel the need to judge other people. You aren't kind enough. You aren't compassionate enough. You aren't working hard enough. You aren't efficient enough. Like nothing that anyone around them does is good enough for these people. Well, it's not that they're bad people. It's that the threat response is activated and they're walking around like this ball of stress or anxiety, right? And it's like, hey, you need to chill. And I know a lot of the time we're like, they just need a trip to Mexico. A week on an all-inclusive is going to make them better. And so we send them off on a vacation and they come back and like after 2 days back on the job, if not 2 hours, they're back to their stressed state. What's going on? It's that the amygdala in them is not just like a hijack that can happen like walking through the woods, a bear comes out. It's actually the amygdala is taken over. They're walking in a stressed state 24/7. And, that's a challenge. That's a real challenge. Why? Because as a manager, as a leader, as a team lead, I want to make sure that my people aren't walking around in a threat state, but they're walking around in a safety state. Now, a lot of the time as team leads, we have no control over why people are operating in a threat state, right? I mean, we can only control what we can, but let me just tell you this, friend, a lot of the people just walked into the job in a stressed state already. They showed up that way in a threatened state. Who knows why? Maybe they've got financial stress. Maybe they've got relational problems. Maybe they just had a fight with the dog, or maybe a fight with their partner. Maybe, the taxi driver didn't pick them up on time. Like there's a million reasons why people can be in a stressed or a threat state. And so what that means for you and I as team leads and leaders is we have to work extra hard in 2024, almost harder than you think you should, to create that safety, to create that environment. Why? Because safety accelerates growth, productivity, high performance, and profit, whereas fear stunts and restricts growth, high performance, productivity, and profit. It really goes back to this idea that belonging brings better. belonging brings better. If I want to bring better into my workplace, then I need to create that sense of belonging. So I want to give you just a simple way that you can create safety in every relationship. And I'm happy to acknowledge that this isn't my model. This is from a neuroscientist by the name of Dr. David Rock. And way back in 2008, he created what's called the SCARF model. And the SCARF model, that's SCARF, actually is a model that helps you in any human relationship to create safety. Let me give it to you real quick. The first thing, the S stands for status. If I want to create safety for another person, then the first question I have to ask, irregardless of any other question, is how can I enhance your sense of status, your sense of worth, your sense of value, your sense of being respected? I think today, we live in a low respect culture, We live in a culture where we actually aren't really taught to respect people. Actually, I referenced earlier in this video, my wife as an Asian woman raised in Asia. Like it's so amazing to me. One of the biggest differences that I've noticed, again, as a Caucasian person raised in Canada, is just the sheer level of respect that people in her culture have for, let's say, people who are elders or people who are more accomplished. They don't feel threatened by these people. They're not sitting in the corner somewhere playing a victim card, acting like they're some kind of oppressed person. They have a culture of respect. Now, of course, that could be taken too far at times, and those people who are respected, maybe when they shouldn't be, might abuse that. But that is, I think, far a better option operating in a culture of respect than what we have over here in North America, which is like we don't respect anything or anyone. It's almost like we have a culture of disrespect. It's like, oh, I'm the cool guy if I operate in a place of disrespect. Well, you might be the cool guy for that on social media, banging out your memes and mocking people and all of that. But listen, in interpersonal relationships, the neuroscience is clear. We have to create status. We have to create respect for each other. And if we don't, then the other person's just not going to feel safe around this. Now, you try this out. You don't even have to be a CEO. Just try this out with your kid. Try this out with your mom. Try this out with your partner. See what disrespect does. See what attacking that person does. You know it as well as I do. They're not going to feel safe around you. But the moment from a healthy, authentic place, you create respect, you offer value, you offer a sense of status, as long as you're sincere, right? It can't be fake. It can't be, you flattering them. It's got to come from the heart, right? Straight from the heart. Bryan Adams sung about many years ago. I'll tell you what, you will create safety for that person. The second thing that creates safety is, and this is the C, SCARF, S is status, the C is certainty. Now, certainty is so important. One of the biggest problems we have in our world right now, and I'm going to maybe do a whole video on this. I know our video people will go crazy if I do, but it's really the politicians, their entire job, it feels like to me, is to take away people's sense of certainty, to always make you think like there's a threat, there's a problem, there's an issue. And so we just came out of COVID, and then it's, oh my God, we got this and now all of that. And it's like, man, like, can you just let us chill out for a little bit? But of course they can't do that. Why? Because fear is a wonderful way to get people to vote for you. Next time you vote, no matter who you vote for, ask yourself this: am I being motivated in my vote by fear, or am I being motivated by possibility? And, when you create a lack of certainty for your team and for your environment, then you are not actually creating the safety that's so important. The A, so S, safety, S is status, C is certainty. The A stands for autonomy. Now, autonomy is the thing that allows people to feel like they can make their own choices. You know what? People don't want to be told what to do. Hate to break it to you, right? Maybe your dog does. I don't know. Like, did you ever ask them? But I can guarantee you people don't. People actually like to be asked, and they often like to be, they like you to ask permission. They don't want to be told. And so even as a leader, even as an executive, can I invite you to start asking? to start offering possibilities, to start giving people choice rather than imposing on them a mandate, because you're going to increase their sense of safety. And remember, belonging brings better. Okay, the fourth thing, the R stands for relatedness. And relatedness is just the strength of our connection with each other. And so it's really impossible to feel safe around somebody if you don't have a strong connection with them. And so as a boss, like, I don't want to get up into people's personal lives and all of that. Of course not. But you have to have some level of connection. Why? If for no other reason, so that that person around me as their lead can feel safe, right? And then the last letter under F is fairness. And so the SCARF model, the S stands for status, the C stands for certainty, the A stands for autonomy, the R stands for relatedness, and the F stands for fairness. In other words, people deserve, want, need to feel like they're being treated fairly. And as a boss, I'll tell you what, I have the capacity to make sure that they're treated fairly. As a matter of fact, that's probably one of my main jobs, is to make sure that people are treated fairly in the environment that we have created together. And so I want to thank you for taking some time to tune into this video. I'll tell you what, without a doubt, in a change-rich environment, in other words, the change is not going away, we as leaders need to understand that belonging brings better. And so if we want better, then we need to create that environment for belonging. And you might be struggling with creating that. Listen, reach out. I'll tell you what, I've got here our Flourishing Workplace Playbook. We've been using this with organizations now for many years. Of course, we keep updating it. Don't worry about that. But I'll tell you what we've discovered is that you're just often, as a leader, struggling just to keep the balls spinning. And you don't necessarily have the time or the tools, maybe even the expertise to build that safety on your own. And so would you reach out to us? And we'd love to hop on a discovery call with you, team lead or executive or HR director or whatever you may be. And maybe we can have a conversation with you about how we can create that brain safe environment for your team. Tell you what, we've got the tools to do it. All the information to set up a discovery call with one of our team is in the post below. So thanks so much for tuning in here today. And make sure you tune in for our next episode, where we're going to talk about the fact that mindset is literally everything when it comes to change. So we'll see you then.